Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Well, you know I like an auction.
Yeah.
And I've bought some strange things at auction before you have as well, haven't you, Eamon?
Yeah, well, Ellie would throw this in the bin that you're coming up with now.
How about this? Admiral Lord Nelson's hair.
No.
Cut. I mean, is this a bit spooky? Cut as he lay dying during the Battle of Trafalgar, so someone's gone, oh, we'll just have a little bit of that there. In 1805, is on sale in Jersey, and it's a little cup. How much would you pay for the hair?
No, nothing. It would go in the bin, straight in the bin.
What, even? What? Nelson? That's very disrespectful to the British culture and heritage.
I think it's disrespectful that he lay there dying and someone thought, we'll take a quick stick.
Well, maybe they just had, maybe they thought, you know, because there's obviously the famous painting, isn't there, of the Battle of Trafalgar. Maybe they thought, we'll give him a quick haircut, and then they kept their £15,000.
No.
15 grand.
Where's the hair come from? What part of the body?
His
is the
head,
hair from?
Eamon.
Well, it could be his underarm. I don't know. You know, it depends.
All right, let me have a little look.
You would bid
very
more.
curly. I think it's his head. It's his head. What?
You would bid more for his head than, say, his underarm.
Well, I think so, yeah, I would hope so, yeah.
Or anywhere else.
I would hope so. A little less whiffy there, the head hair. And there it is. And it's in a little pot.
No.
And the only way you can probably find out is if you DNA test it, I guess. It's definitely his.
Whoever pays for that is bonkers.
Well,
That's creepy.
I was seriously tempted to make a bid for a toupee. Not for me, but as worn by John Wayne.
John Wayne's wig?
Yeah.
Why?
Wow.
Why?
Well, why I didn't get it was my wife said to me, that is not coming into the house.
Well, she's right. She's right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Allen and this is Free Speech Nation. This evening, has free speech come out trumps? You'll get that joke later. Are the gender wars finally over? Will AI replace Louis Schaefer? Plus, how some of the United States have reacted to their new president.
I'm personally here because I had a mental breakdown after Donald Trump won.
Yep. And some comedians answering some crazy culture developments from the live studio audience. But first, the news.
Very good evening to you. From the newsroom, the top story just after 7 o'clock. The Home Secretary has warned online platforms they must act now to remove violent content. That's after the Southport killer accessed extremist material before his deadly attack in July of last year. Axel Rudakabana, who murdered 3 young girls and tried to kill 10 others, downloaded an al-Qaeda training manual and watched graphic footage online just before his stabbing spree. Vet Cooper says it's unacceptable that such hateful content remains easily available and is urging tech companies to take immediate action ahead of new online safety laws in March. The government's also announced a public inquiry into missed chances to stop Ruda Cabana, who was already known to police and anti-extremism authorities. Meanwhile, the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch spoke to us earlier here on GB News, and she said the issue of integration must also be looked at following the attack in Southport.
He should have been in love with this country. He should have been saying, this is the best country on earth. I say, and the parents, I don't know if they did or not, because that's how I feel. And I do think that we need to have a broader conversation about integration in this country. It's got to be active, not passive. It didn't matter so much when only a handful of people were coming from nearby countries at a very slow rate. Now, people from all over the place are coming very quickly, and because of technology, they can still keep their heads and their cultures elsewhere. This is dangerous.
The government is also cracking down on online knife sales after it was revealed that Axel Ruda Cabana purchased his murder weapon on Amazon when he was just 17 years old. Under tough new rules, buyers will need to show photo ID at the point of purchase and again when the knife is delivered, with packages banned from being left on doorsteps. Delivery drivers will only be allowed to hand knives to the person who ordered them in plans set to feature in the Crime and Policing Bill this spring. The Home Secretary again has said it is a total disgrace that dangerous weapons are still so easy for children to get hold of. In other news tonight, a 19-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was seriously injured when a car was driven at her. The officer had approached that vehicle after reports of suspicious activity, but was then struck by the car, which drove at her at high speed. She remains in hospital, but is understood to be recovering well. The force's chief inspector called the incident truly shocking and condemned attacks on officers as completely unacceptable. She is currently being supported by her colleagues. Donald Trump says that Gaza should be, quote, cleaned out, suggesting that Egypt and Jordan need to take in Palestinians who've been displaced by the war there. Speaking on Air Force One today, he described the region as a demolition site and said relocation could even be long-term. The US president says he's spoken to Jordan's King Abdullah and plans to approach Egypt's president next. His comments have sparked anger, though, among Palestinians who've rejected what they call an attempt to displace people from their homeland. Jordan has flatly refused the idea, while Egypt had previously ruled out taking in any refugees. Well, that comes as Israel has blocked thousands of displaced Palestinians from returning to northern Gaza, accusing Hamas of breaching a fragile ceasefire after what has been 15 months of intense conflict. It comes after Hamas released 4 Israeli female soldiers. Israel responded by releasing 200 Palestinian prisoners. But the Israeli government insists Palestinians won't be allowed north until Hamas releases Israeli civilian Arbel Yihad as agreed in the original deal. And back here, closer to home, 100-mile-an-hour winds have left 2 people dead and thousands without power. But now a new storm named Herinia is adding to the travel and weather chaos. Gusts of up to 80 miles an hour have been recorded in Devon, and heavy rain is sweeping across England, Wales and Scotland, with the Met Office issuing warnings for flooding, travel disruption and even a danger to life. Floodwaters have also blocked roads and rail lines in Cornwall, with flights also delayed and even cancelled. And coastal areas are set to face crashing waves, and dozens of flood warnings are in place as saturated ground increases the risk of more damage. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you for another look at the top stories in around an hour. Now, though, it's Free Speech Nation.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Stephen Allen. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and of course we'll have the latest from those lovable culture warriors. See how that's going. Coming up on the show tonight, will recent events in the US mean free speech comes out Trump's because the name is also a phrase. And I'll be joined by the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Greg Swenson. More trans madness in Scotland. That'll be a shocker, won't it? A convicted murderer is taking another inmate to court for misgendering him. Hope I got that last bit right. I'll be joined by the co-director for Women Scotland, Susan Smith. And the assisted dying bill, is it being properly scrutinised? I'll be joined by former MP Tom Hunt, who has some serious concerns. And of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful, trying to big them up, studio audience. My comedian guest this evening, we have Cressida Weston and Lewis Schaefer. For yourself. Do you know what? Let's start with that. Let's jump in, get some questions from our audience. Our first question is from Anton.
Do you think celebrities are worried too much about being cancelled?
Do I think that celebrities are worried too much about being cancelled? Well, there's potentially some good news for them, because celebrities who are worried that they might be cancelled can take out insurance to deal with the consequences. The policy provided by insurance company Samfire Risk will give stars access to 24/7 help hotline in case they are attacked online or judged to have crossed a moral line. It also includes crisis management hotline and misinformation cover. Lewis, surely, if they knew about this in December, I'd have bought it you for Christmas.
You know what? It's an American idea. This is what Americans do. They come up with answers to problems, and whether an insurance company will actually come through on this, you know, you don't know.
So you think that maybe if you got cancelled, when you get cancelled, sorry.
Well, the next time.
The next time you get cancelled again.
The next time.
Your insurer would be like, well, maybe you didn't get cancelled and try and somehow...
You have to read the small print, you know. Some things you cannot put in... You can't pay insurance for someone breaking a law, I don't think.
I don't think we could afford your premiums. Is the issue. I think for the average person in the media, it's a great idea. It's a bit like joining the Free Speech Union. For Lewis, I mean, there comes a critical point, doesn't there, where it's not worth it. Can you imagine what they'd charge you?
Well, I think that yes, it would be a problem. I know, and you know too, Cressida. You know, people react really negatively to me.
They do, don't they?
They don't.
No.
They don't like. No, they don't like me. So, at what point is that like something? You can go to court and say, Cressida doesn't like me. How come she doesn't like me? I want some money because she doesn't...
I don't think it's just getting cancelled by Cressida.
I'm just using her as an example. Steve doesn't like me. What about Josh doesn't like me?
How do we prove what you would have earned? This is what I want to know. The article doesn't tell us. It just says that you can get a crisis helpline. You'd love that, someone to talk to 24 hours a day. But how do we assess what Lewis Schaefer would have earned had he known how to behave properly? It's very difficult.
It isn't that difficult, because you just look at past earnings and it's...
So it definitely wouldn't be worth it for you, is what you're saying.
It wouldn't be worth it for me. They'd say you didn't make any money last year, and you know, how could you have been cancelled?
Yeah. Just, I know we're having fun and all that, but just to be the classic Stephen Allen that I always am, isn't there just some insurance company getting in the news? Doing an insurance policy that surely no one's ever really going to take up, but it gets in the newspapers.
I think they will, because Free Speech Union, I mean, that would be my answer, join the Free Speech Union. If you haven't said something... I mean, there are certain things you can't say, but for the most part, they'll be very helpful if you do get in trouble. This, I don't know. I mean, it's the natural progression, isn't it?
I'd never heard of Samfire Risk before, other than, like, when cooking badly. And now it turns out it's a natural company.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of them either.
No, well...
No, but also, you know, back in the 1950s, Betty Grable had her legs insured. I don't know, she had her legs insured for $1 million. That was a lot of money back in the 1950s. So you can't rule it out. But whether they'd get the money, how do you prove that, you know? I think you'd have to actually think something bad might happen. Right?
Yeah.
And number two, you can't think it too much, because you would basically control yourself then.
No, other than you. I think we found the one customer for a company that probably doesn't exist. Our next question is from Roger. What have you got for us, Roger?
Hello. Did Elon Musk really perform a Nazi salute following Trump's inauguration?
Did Elon Musk actually perform a Nazi salute? Speaking at President Trump's inauguration event on Monday, Elon Musk slapped his right hand to his chest before shooting his arm diagonally upwards. Some would say it's a Roman salute. Others described it as a heartfelt expression of joy. Obviously, other people might have said some other things. The US Anti-Defamation League called it an awkward gesture and a moment of enthusiasm, not a Nazi salute. But German editorial said that it was complicated. A Hitler salute. Basically, let's take a look. Let's see what you make.
Do we have to see?
We have to.
And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you.
I mean, was he dabbing and missed? There's a chance there's that as well.
Well, he's throwing his heart, isn't he? Or he's reclaiming the gesture. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no,
like the moustache, it can't just be Hitler, you know. Charlie Chaplin had one.
I don't think Elon Musk is a Nazi, and I think this is symptomatic of people who don't have anything to really go after him for.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit silly, is my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is it just... Surely no one really thinks, do you know what, he's a secret Nazi and he's letting us know he's a secret Nazi by doing a Nazi salute. That's not secret, is it?
Well, they are thinking that. This is how crazy the left-wing Democrats team world are. They're crazy. They got nothing to go on, so they just think, oh, he's a Nazi. He probably is a Nazi. He grew up in South Africa, you know. I mean, there's lots of reasons. There's lots of reasons for being... What part of being a Nazi...
insurance.
Yes. Do they have insurance?
No, you need it now.
They need Nazi insurance. Who knows? There are lots of reasons for being a Nazi. Which are the clothes, maybe? The trains are running on time. You know, the global vision. There's lots of reasons, but there's lots of reasons for not being a Nazi. Is he a Nazi? We're all a bit Nazi, basically.
Well, I think those are the words of Louis Schaefer, and you're not representing
That's the
me.
words of Louis Schaefer, who's a 100% New York Jew, not like Josh. A real...
He's not here to defend himself. Often you don't have to say that about the host, but...
that was a joke. But you know what it is? There's lots of good things about the Nazis, but lots of bad
Wait a minute. I regret saying yeah halfway through your sentence. I don't think it was going to end like that. But yeah, I mean, surely this is just a case of like an awkward moment.
He's always talking about being on the spectrum. He's a guy with a lot of power, a lot of money, and now he's being allowed to be looked at and on camera a lot. It's not going to end well, is it? He's not going to be a great dancer.
You think he was going for the YMCA but just missed?
I don't know what he was going for. I think he's adorable. He always looks a bit awkward. It's like infinite power, very, very awkward. I don't think it was a Nazi salute.
No, but it was, can we then agree, a silly thing to do? If you are accidentally going to mess up a salute, don't land it there.
It would be a silly thing to do if he knew, I'm going to make this gesture, which also the Nazis made, but I don't mean it, but it's just like the gesture. Yeah. That would be a silly thing.
But isn't there loads of footage of other people doing this? I keep seeing clips on X of various other... I think there's one of Macron doing it and possibly even Harris. This is something people do. It's a hard thing.
But those people should know better, and Elon Musk doesn't know better.
OK. Our next question is from Madeline. What's your question?
Why was a DEI literary agency forced to close this week?
Why was the DEI literary agency forced to close this week? So this agency, launched with the aim of bringing diversity to the publishing industry, has closed after swallowing more than £1.3 million of public money in 7 years. Interesting. The founders of the Good Literary Agency vowed to improve access for the next generation of writers, but have this week suggested diminishing publisher investment in authors has caused progress on making the industry more diverse to stall. Is that why you don't have a book out, Lewis?
Maybe, because they haven't come and offered me money. The reason they've closed is because the government said, OK, maybe we want to spend money doing something else, which I can't believe it. The problem with this country is, a great country, it's just too much centralization. It's like they're giving this company money to give to other people. It's not the business of the government or the state, the central government, to give out our money, and that's why the Labour government and the Tories too are going to crush.
To call it our money implies that you pay tax.
But you know, they understand what I mean by it. Why do you have to point out?
Yeah, like the royal we. I see.
Yeah, no, because they want to know which country I'm talking about, because I come from a better country than theirs. So they're going to think I'm talking about America when I'm not. I'm talking about this horrible place.
Every time he claims on the insurance, is going to go ding ding. We need a sound effect for it, isn't it? So you want to make of this?
Well, it's almost as though, even though diversity is our strength, that when you're in a literary agency, what you actually need is the best writers. That's what it looks like to me.
Good books are their strength.
I think they might be, yeah, and just... it's just so painful, isn't it? Because if you are a minority writer at this agency who wrote an absolutely brilliant book and you're now reading this, all your good work's taken away, isn't it? I hate DEI. I'm glad to see it's on its way out.
Yeah. Well, you get the, what do they call it, the racism of low expectation, by presuming, like, the only way
we're getting onto that in a couple of stories' time.
Probably in every story tonight, is it?
Would you let him do his job, Cressida?
It's all right, Lewis. I got it. I feel I don't need help
a bit
quite
rich.
yet. And our final question for this moment comes from Liam. What have you got for us, Liam?
What are universities doing to help minority groups get better grades?
Oh, the racism of low expectations. Interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. What are universities doing to help minority groups get better exam results? Elite universities are set to improve results for minority groups by moving away from traditional exams. With fewer in-person and unseen papers, even replacing them with the inclusive assessment, such as open book tests. I don't know what any of these things mean. And taking the papers home. That's a Donald Trump thing, isn't it? This comes as the UK universities are under pressure to close the gap in the proportion of first given to white middle-class students compared with other groups. What's going on here, then, Cressida?
It's racism, isn't it? It's really quite stark as well. I mean, what I read didn't specify any groups, thank goodness, but the implication is that some can't cope with written exams. I mean, it's just so outrageous. If it was about gender and they said, oh, ladies can't cope with exams, I'd be extremely offended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although you'd take the extra time in the exam, though, wouldn't you? You wouldn't give up
She did take the extra.
Same point, whether I did or I didn't, forevermore, I'd be an open book person instead of she did a proper exam person, and I just think that is awful to take that away from
So you know what an open book test is? I mean, this is all...
You could look in your textbook.
Cheat?
Well, that's what we used to call it, yes.
I used to have to write on my arm, and now you're allowed the book.
Exactly.
This is ridiculous, Lewis.
It's not cheating, because you have to sit there and write a sentence, and people... you give a monkey a book, they can't really write a sentence. So I didn't mean it that way, but...
they can take the book home with them, though.
Yeah, but yeah, is that the truth? The truth is, it is racism. It's like, let's give... maybe there's a subtle thing. Let's diminish the belief system of minorities by doing this. Because it tells people, whatever they are, poor people, working class people, whatever color or religion, that they're not good enough. So it's anti those people.
But the weird thing about this is these are the people who've already got to a fancy university, an elite university, a red brick one, or the Russell Trust. So if you've managed to get to that stage, you've already jumped over enough hurdles to prove you can do it. Now it's the final step of, like, how well can you do it?
Not necessarily, no, because I had friends of mine my own kids, they went to... maybe he got into the school because he went to a horrible Peckham High School. He went to a school in Peckham, whatever. Or I know other people, they were from poor families, divorced families, whatever, and they were given the benefit of the doubt. And my son did okay, but other people don't.
So if no one fails a course, though, it feels like you've got a certificate of attendance.
But you want to know... I didn't listen to that.
OK.
You want to know...
That makes sense.
You want to know...
No, you're right, you didn't listen to that, did you? Next on Free... I don't have to listen to that. Next on Free Speech Nation, I'll be joined by the chairman of Republicans Overseas to discuss if Trump's return to the White House will bring about a new era of free speech in the United States and maybe the whole West. Don't go anywhere.
I was listening.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Ironic article in The Guardian, Nick, caring about facts.
Yeah, this is Meta is ushering in a world without facts, says Nobel Peace Prize winner. And they just seem to give these Nobel Peace Prizes to anyone these days. So it's Maria Ressa.
Not working.
Zuckerberg came out, and it was very bold. He said a few things. We're going to use community notes instead of fact-checkers. Fact-checkers in inverted commas, because it just means people pushing usually a specific viewpoint. Community notes seems to be a great system that X uses, so why not do that? I think that's great. He's going to reduce restrictions on topics like immigration and gender. Good, because I'm against censorship. He's going to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more, which is great. He's also moving content moderation to Texas instead of California, which is banter. So now the cynical version is he's just realises we've got a new regime, it's the MAGA era, and I want to be mates with Trump, who said that I should that if I interfere with the 2024 election, he should spend the rest of his life in prison. So he did mention he might be a bit scared of that. He was involved in that in Facebook suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and I feel that he didn't like being a part of all that from watching interviews.
And also the suppression of arguments about gender and sex, what is biological sex and whatnot. You get banned for saying there are two sexes.
They're on the wrong side of this, and now he's correcting. But the weird thing is the people, of course, the people who don't like this, the lefties, this person, Ressa, is saying that this is a big problem. It's an extremely dangerous time. I've seen all this from the lefties. They just call it disinformation. They're worried about this because to them it's disinformation. To other people it's information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we can all agree if people think they're getting their facts just directly from Facebook, then something's horribly wrong. But we know that. The community notes thing, I think, is quite good because that sort of first-hand experience people are putting down, aren't they?
Yeah. People have loads of different views come together, and it's an aggregate, so that's why it works.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation, only on GB News. And given that you're watching GB News on a Sunday night, I'm going to assume that you are aware that Donald Trump is back. If not, that was a bit of a shocker for you, isn't it? However, what will his return mean for free speech in the United States as we know it? And what will happen when the US doesn't stay there, does it? It spreads. Might it come all the way to the entire West? A revival of free speech? Well, to find out more, we can discuss this. I'm delighted to be joined by the chairman of Republicans Overseas, UK, Greg Swenson. Thank you for joining. Thank you. I'm presuming you're a Trump man. Yes. Given the So what will this mean? This term, this second run at it, actually mean for free speech?
Well, it's obviously all good news. So far, so good. I have to cheat here. He passed the...
No, you're allowed to cheat. It's an open book test.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I saw the last segment. Restoring free speech and ending federal censorship executive order. That was announced Monday or Tuesday.
All right.
So far, so good. This became a big issue. In many ways, it's kind of an antidote to what's happened the last 4 years. And that's troubling in the U.S., also troubling here in the U.K. I hope, I think we kind of imported wokeism and censorship to the UK. I hope, and now we've rejected it quite deliberately, quite clearly. I hope that happens here too. It's coming.
When it's just one person doing a slow hand clap, it seems like a protest. But when people join in, it's good. Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there. But look, I think so much has happened in 4 years with the hostility to free speech, outright censorship, with cooperation from the government. And I think, you can look at it's a long list, but there was the Russia collusion hoax where the mainstream media basically colluded with the Democrats to create that hoax. The Hunter Biden laptop, and I don't know if you saw Politico this week, a couple of former Politico reporters came clean and said, the bosses upstairs told us not to mention the laptop. Now, we knew that because, Twitter and Facebook censored it, literally censored it. They shut down the New York Post. So,
can I just jump in on that?
Yeah.
Is that part of the problem of having these businesses that can make these decisions. They're too powerful. So is it is it even solvable? It's not like that was written in law. There wasn't a law that was passed that said no free speech, but somehow it happened.
That's true, but I think in many ways, the people that run these big media companies can have their opinions, and that's fine. And I think most of the big newspapers, for example, in the U.S., have traditionally endorsed Democrat candidates. That's fine. That's free speech. But what happened is that the Hillary Clinton campaign colluded with the media to censor certain things. Then you had Joe Biden's campaign collude. Anthony Blinken, who became Secretary of State, literally called up the CIA and said, "Can you come up with a story about 51 former intelligence officers, saying that it's Russian disinformation?" But all the media companies piled onto that. They went with the story, didn't do their jobs, nobody asked questions. And then you had outright censorship from the social media that basically blocked the New York Post from their Twitter account, from their Facebook account. So these were really outrageous. This is, the First Amendment. This is important in America. If you don't have the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, you can forget about the rest of the other amendments that are important. So I think that's really critical, and I think the people just pushed back on this, and it was so outrageous. They, as usual, the left overstepped their traditional boundaries and just went so extreme on it. COVID was a disaster. The Great Barrington Declaration was literally censored by the big tech media and ignored by the corporate media, the traditional media. You had the Joe Biden hoax, which was, oh no, he's fine. Come on. Even, they tried, but even with the censorship, even with the media on board with the White House, fabricating this idea that Joe Biden was just fine. Before the debate on June 27, 65% of Americans thought that Joe had cognitive problems. I think after June 27th, it was probably 100%. But
I think after that debate, anyone thinking he didn't have had it themselves.
Right, right. That's a good point. And I think, it just showed the hypocrisy of the left-leaning media in the U.S. that they were willing to work with the White House to cover it up.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
So what is the solution? Because in America, you do have some right-leaning media, fewer in number, but we can list, Newsmax and Fox and things like that. Is the solution to do that? Because America normally would be a bit free markety, wouldn't you? Compete.
Let the market figure it out, and that happens, right? You do have conservative media. For example, 32% of businesses closed in Michigan, but the people that were making quite legitimate arguments that closing schools is stupid, closing businesses is stupid, restaurants standing 6 feet apart, all this absurd stuff. It seems silly now, but if you wanted to have that conversation, that was not permitted by the media because the White House was working with the media to censor that.
So how does that get fixed by something that Donald Trump signs?
It's great. Executive orders are funny. There'll be lawsuits against it. The people who love censorship will sue the government. But what he's done is he's basically said the market can do what it wants, but the federal government cannot collude with media to advance what they want. That's cultural revolution stuff from China and East Germany and the Soviet Union. That's really bizarre that we would have that in a Western country. And so he's just drawing the line in the sand and saying, if you're in the federal government, you cannot, even if it's pro-Trump stuff, you cannot collude with social media or corporate media.
So this is the thing that strikes me and why I often have a viewpoint that's not that popular. It doesn't matter who's in charge. You should like free speech, because at some point they won't be.
Absolutely.
And at some point it'll flip and you'll be the one censored.
And the Democrats used to be the party of free speech. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, that was Mike Dukakis was a card-carrying member of the ACLU. The 1988 presidential candidate, sorry. This is really a flip because, the Democrats used to pride themselves in that. They were the protesters in the 1960s. They were the ones who called out big corporations and big government. And now it's really flipped, and it's a shame.
I'd love to get your take on why that happened. What factors were stirred into a pot that made that change?
Yeah, I think it's the progressive radical left that took over the Democrat Party. So a lot of the rejection this week of DEI, of censorship, I think it will liberate some of the Democrats who aren't that crazy. You know, they're not the extremist left. And, you know, you saw this with, in Michigan. For some reason, I like Michigan tonight. But Henry Payne is a cartoonist. And he did a great cartoon. I thought it was hysterical because cartoons are supposed to be funny. And they're supposed to push the boundaries a little bit. But there's a congressman in America, Rashida Tlaib, and she's very pro-Hamas. And he did a cartoon after the IDF did the trick with the pagers. And it was a cartoon, funny, of the congresswoman with a defective pager on her desk. I thought it was funny. And it was also critical of her, but that's called free speech. And the absolute hunt on this guy was outrageous. It was like Charlie Hebdo, you know, from 10 years ago in Paris. And that's the kind of extreme radical left that the Democrats basically became in the last 4 years. I think that's going to change. I think some sensibility will come back. A lot of Democrats are very much for free speech. It was part of their, you know, it's part of their history. Yeah. And so it's just that the radical wing was allowed to take over, and Joe Biden obviously was asleep at the wheel the whole time. So he just let it go.
Not always asleep, sometimes just not paying attention, zoned out.
Falling on the stairs.
Yeah, falling upstairs as well.
Yeah.
Not even.
It's
not
tricky.
even
I've tried it. It's really hard.
It's difficult. You're against the law of gravity. That's how much of a maverick that guy was. Yeah, and the idea of free speech, I mean, controlling free speech spreads. Yeah. Because if you fear having your free speech curtailed, you stay quiet, which has effectively done the job for them.
That's right. That's right. And you saw that in the corporations. And I mentioned Cultural Revolution, you know, from China in the 70s. You know, that happened at the universities in America, right? I mean, imagine if you were a conservative student at Cornell or Harvard or Penn. You know, you're an endangered species there. That's one thing. But you actually were endangered, literally. And so, you know, this is what happens when the radical progressive left takes over the institutions. I don't think the majority of Democrats are that radical, but they took over the media, the universities, the big institutions, you know, many think tanks, but also, you know, these global organizations, these multilateral organizations like the WHO. Good for them. And you know, so I think it's fantastic that this rejection has come, and it's not just President Trump. It's the voters. It's the people. It's great. I hope it spreads here. I really do.
I mean, I can also say whatever I want. I'm being told I can't say whatever I want at the moment. Okay, never mind. But thanks very much for coming in. Chats about it. The chairman of the Republicans oversees the Brexit.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Right. Next on Free Speech Nation, is the assisted dying bill being pushed through Parliament without adequate parliamentary scrutiny? My next guest thinks so. We'll find out more on the way. Stay tuned.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK, further wet and windy weather to come, although signs of an improvement later on in the week. At the moment, low pressure is anchored towards the west of the UK. That's dominating our weather. Tightly packed isobars indicating pretty blustery conditions, and these weather fronts moving in from the south and southwest, bringing outbreaks of rain at times. One band of rain affects Scotland tonight, giving some hill snow, particularly above about 450 metres, where we'll see some settling snow here. And another area of rain moving in from the southwest across England and Wales into the early hours, some of which could be quite heavy, accompanied by blustery winds, particularly towards the southeast. It's mostly a frost-free night, with temperatures in mid-single figures. As for Monday, well, we hold on to a very unsettled picture. Low pressure still close by towards the west of the UK. So to start with on Monday, although there'll be some brightness towards the north of mainland Scotland, the rest of the country is likely to see some showery bursts of rain, again with some hill snow in places. Across Northern Ireland, there'll be showery bursts of rain as well, and showery too across parts of Wales into the southwest of England. So it's the south and east of England, some central parts too, that are likely to see the best of the early brightness. As we go through the rest of the day on Monday, with low pressure still close by, there'll be further outbreaks of rain at times in pretty much all parts of the UK. Occasional bright spells between, still some winteriness across the hills of Scotland at times, and wherever you are, a pretty blustery day with some gales, particularly down towards the south and southwest at times through the day. And despite some sunshine at times, those temperatures will be struggling. Highs of 6 to 9 Celsius, 9 down towards the southwest. It's 48 in Fahrenheit, but add on the effect of that unsettled weather and feeling much cooler out and about. As for Tuesday, well, with low pressure still over the top of the UK, there'll be further showers to come at times. Again, some of those could be quite heavy at times. The winds do start to ease down, so probably feeling a little bit better when we get the sunshine between those showers, with temperatures still peaking at around the 10 Celsius mark. So Tuesday and Wednesday continue pretty unsettled, further rain at times, but things do start to quieten down later in the week with some sunshine around.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Stephen Allen. Now, as you may recall, the assisted dying bill passed its second reading in Parliament in November and is now going through the process of being scrutinised by a committee of MPs. But is it enough? Writing in Spikes, former Conservative MP Tom Hunt has raised fears that the committee may not be doing its job, which means this extraordinary piece of legislation could be passed without proper scrutiny. And I'm delighted to say that Tom joins us in the studio now. Tom, welcome. So, I read you, Peter, of all of the pieces of legislation to have worries about, this is right up there at the top of the tree, isn't it? So tell us about your worries.
Well, I think it is. And I mean, I'm a former MP, and there's a number of stages when you create law. There's a second reading, there's a bill committee, there's a third reading, and then it goes to the House of Lords. I was on a few bill committees, and I'd love to say that they were fascinating, engaging things. Often they're not. Actually, they're incredibly dry. I once remember being sat there for an hour and a half listening to the Labour Shadow Courts Minister drone on for an hour and a half, you know, wishing that the day would end. But this piece of legislation, you know, the assisted dying bill, I call it the assisted suicide bill, because that's what it is, and I tend to call things what they are, is probably just about the most important piece of legislation that I can remember this Parliament discussing. I think, regardless of one's view, whether they're pro it, whether they're against it, I think we can have the debate respectfully. We're all coming from the same place here. Ultimately, we want to protect vulnerable people. We want to end suffering.
I think we should also, just for balance, which is my job here as well, realise that if it's passed its second vote in the House of Parliament, then more people voted for it than against it. So more representatives are in favour at the moment, just to balance it.
Quite. I mean, it was a pretty narrow vote. The majority was around 50. It would only take about 50 members of Parliament to change their mind, and you could get a totally different outcome at third reading. And actually, we had probably over 30 MPs who gave it qualified support at second reading. They said that I kind of agree with the principle of it, but I need to make sure that the bill in front of us has the appropriate safeguards.
Well, that's the phase we're on now, isn't it? The detail phase.
It is.
This is why the committee needs to do its job.
It does, and I've expressed strong views about the bill committee, as I said this week in Spiked. Firstly, so Kim Blair-Beater, it's a private member's bill, and she brought it forward. You know, she said when it narrowly passed second reading, she said that the sunlight would win the day, there'd be full accountability, she'd reach out to those who opposed and assuage as many concerns as possible. And she'd ensure that all voices would be heard. And the voices of, say, the 350 disability organisations and charities that have opposed the assisted dying bill, their voices would be heard. That is not what we're seeing. When it comes to the membership to the bill committee, what we've seen is that the MPs who are on the bill committee who opposed it at second reading are generally new MPs who have barely been in Parliament for a few months, have very limited understanding of the parliamentary process, whereas most of those who are in favour of a bill tend to be seasoned parliamentarians, most of whom spoke about the bill at second reading, whereas the opponents, only one of them, Danny Kruger, spoke against the bill at second reading. So I think it's stacking the deck with the perception that you're ticking the box of having a few opposed to it on the committee.
So you're saying this is a deliberate move, a cynical move to try and pack the committee?
It certainly looks like that for me. And in fact, the cross-party group of MPs who are organised opposition, across all parties, suggested a number of names of opponents to go onto this committee, and that included medical professionals. One MP, who's actually a psychiatrist, wanted to be on the committee. No, not on the committee. And then last week, what we saw was more of this theme. We saw the first meeting of the Bill Committee. They had a vote at the last minute to have most of it in private session, not in public session. Not looking good for Sunlight winning the day, not looking good for transparency.
Did they give a reason for that, a justification?
Well, the explanation was that this meeting was to discuss who should be witnesses to give evidence. And they said that they might say things about some of the potential witnesses that might be upsetting or insulting, and it's best to do it in private. That was the explanation. I'm not sure I buy it. But what's interesting is initially, bearing in mind with the assisted dying bill, issues around coercion, about mental state, etc., the pivotal importance of those issues. Initially, the Royal College of Psychiatrists was blocked. There was a vote on whether the Royal College of Psychiatrists should have a representative on the Bill Committee, and there was a vote, and it was blocked. You had, in terms of those 350 disability charities who opposed the assisted dying bill, not one representative from any of those organisations is going to be giving evidence. And when it comes to the other jurisdictions across the world where these sorts of laws are being introduced, there's going to be 8 representatives. All of them are in favour of a principle of assisted dying. There's not anyone from, say, Canada, which has been an example where now approximately 5% of all deaths are now euthanasia. It was initially introduced, very strict criteria, in 2016. Death had to be reasonable, foreseeable. Now that's gone, and out of those who are going for this, where it's not death reasonably foreseeable, about 58% have a disability. And we've got a growing number of people in Canada who have been opting for euthanasia, and a key thing for them has been things like loneliness, not wanting to feel like a burden.
The idea of obviously there's the slippery slope fallacy and there's the actual slippery slope, and that's what we're talking about here. And that's why you need restrictions put in. And those people who you say are in favour of it with condition would be about having the correct conditions put in. Do you think this committee will help their goal, that side of the argument? Or for those people who only give it their agreed consent with the idea of there being scrutiny, this could go against them? Because those people who like the idea or are willing to consider this as a legal step forward surely want this scrutinised and might be more likely to vote against it if they don't see that Sunlight being the best decision.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that argument, and I think we're already sensing that people don't like what this looks like as a bit of a stitch-up. They don't like it. They didn't like the fact the Royal College of Psychiatrists were initially blocked, and then they were brought back on, by the way, because of the public backlash. But this is not... And let me be clear about this slippery slope point, OK? Let me be really, really clear, because it's been introduced in a lot of different places. Wherever these laws have been introduced, there have been horror stories. Wherever, without exception. I mean, yes, it's been varying degrees of disaster. So Canada, you'll never hear Kim Ledbetter talk about Canada. OK? But you might hear him talk about Oregon. Oregon, where the last stats show over 50% of those who went like this cited feeling like a burden as one of the key reasons why they went for assisted dying. New Zealand, a country which has recently introduced these laws. When it was first introduced, they said, the criteria is going to be really narrow. They had a 6-month requirement like we're proposing, so you have to have a terminal diagnosis within 6 months. They're already trying to get rid of that restriction. And also, the issues with actually diagnosing and actually prognosis You know, we've had a story, I saw a story in the Telegraph last week saying that there are huge numbers of people who said they only had 6 months left to live. 3 years on, they're still alive. Esther Ranson's an example of that. You know, it's wonderful that she is, and I'm really pleased that she's had another Christmas with her family, but isn't that that's an example of the issues?
I mean, this is such a big issue that will be going through our Parliament. We need to keep paying attention to it. We've run out of time on this one, but I'm sure we'll be talking to you again about it at some stage in the future, and keep an eye on this for us. Thank you very much. Tom Hunt, for joining us. Up next on Free Speech Nation, the Donald has decreed that there are only 2 genders in America. I'll be discussing the ramifications of Trump's executive order with top attorney Kara Dansky. Will be on the way next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
There's plenty of sunshine on offer for many over the next couple of days in Europe, but there is some heavy rain as well, particularly for parts of Portugal, northern Spain, northwestern parts of France, and some blustery westerly winds as well continuing throughout Monday. Further east, though, there is plenty of sunshine on offer for southern parts of Italy, Greece, Cyprus, seeing plenty of sunshine throughout Monday afternoon. Temperatures here generally in the mid to high teens, with the highest temperatures likely across Tenerife, where we'll see temperatures around 22 or 23.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Newly released MI5 files reveal that Queen Elizabeth II was kept in the dark over the treachery of a senior courtier.
Yeah, for almost a decade. This is Sir Anthony Blunt, who played a double life, passing intelligence, the KGB, during World War II as a senior MI5 officer. But, remarkably, he was allowed to keep his position amid fears of a major scandal if the truth came out.
Well, now those files have been released by the National Archives, which includes the Queen's response to finding out a trusted member like Anthony Blunt was really a traitor.
Well, joining us now in the studio is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Good to see you this morning, Cameron. This is astonishing.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't a little spy. This was Anthony Blunt was a full-blown spy. He passed to the Soviets the D-Day deception plans, but during the Second World War, he was working for MI5, but a double agent for the KGB as well.
The wrong plans.
He passed on the plans.
The wrong ones.
The wrong one in 1944. Yeah. Exactly. But he then got a job inside Buckingham Palace as one of the Queen's most trusted aides and courtiers, the surveyor of her art, essentially like kind of an art advisor for her late Majesty. There was always suspicions about Anthony Blunt way back in the early 50s because he was part of this notorious Cambridge spy ring, a group of 5 boys recruited at Cambridge. 2 of these people fled to Moscow in 1951. Anthony stayed behind in London and subsequently got a job inside Buckingham Palace, and it wasn't until 1964 that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation, only on GB News. Now, in case you missed it, President Trump has ended the gender wars.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders.
There you have it. All done. Thank you very much. Good night. No, it turns out it wasn't quite as simple as that. In all seriousness, President Trump's executive order does, however, have serious consequences in the US and marks a significant break from the Biden administration's stance on matters of gender and identity. I'm joined now by attorney and writer Kara Dansky, who is an expert in this field. Welcome, Kara. Thanks for joining us down the line. So tell us, what's the impact of this going to be?
Well, it's hard to overstate. This is an incredibly significant development, worth noting about why this is even necessary, because it shouldn't be, but it is. On January 20th, 2021, the very first day of taking office, President Biden issued Executive Order 13988, so-called Preventing and Combating Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation. And the Biden administration spent the next 4 years redefining sex to include so-called gender identity for virtually all purposes under federal administrative law. So this undoes all of that, I'm quite happy to say. It is somewhat limited in a couple of ways that we could talk about. For example, it does not touch state law, although it could have impacts in the states. It doesn't undo any federal statutes. So the United States have some laws on the books that redefine sex to include so-called gender identity, including, interestingly, the Violence Against Women Act. Congress would have to act in order to remedy that. So there are some important limitations due to the inherent limitations of federal executive authority, something President Biden did not appear to understand, but it's incredibly significant nonetheless.
Let me ask you this, Kara. How will this impact trans people?
So the word transgender does not appear in the executive order. What this is about fundamentally is about protecting women's rights and freedom of conscience throughout the federal government. So there are some key provisions on speech that your listeners might be interested in. But fundamentally, this is about, as it says in the opening paragraph, the purpose section, this is about ensuring that federal policy is based on truth. And so it goes on to explain that there are only 2 sexes, women and men, and that sex is immutable.
And how will this trickle down? Because I imagine, an executive order changes some ways that the government does stuff, but how does this affect the way that businesses do stuff and then all the way down to the individual people?
So the entities that are affected are all federal agencies and anyone that receives funding from the federal government. And so the order includes some very interesting provisions that say that the federal government will not fund gender ideology. In part, what that means is that anyone who receives federal money is going to have to reevaluate their policies on protecting so-called gender identity. And the order explicitly requires federal agencies to examine their grants to make sure that that no federal money is going to fund gender ideology. So it remains to be seen how this will affect, for example, state governments that have protected so-called gender identity in the law. We might see some very interesting court battles where, blue states such as New York and California that protect so-called gender identity might be ready to challenge this administration's executive order. So we don't know quite yet. But what we do know is that the order requires all federal agencies to do some general things. For example, all federal agencies are now required to rescind any single policy or guidance that is inconsistent with the order. That's huge. And the order requires certain individual agencies to take specific steps within their jurisdiction. I know people are paying very close attention to whether the Bureau of Prisons will remove male inmates from women's prisons. It orders the Department of Housing and Urban Development to ensure that all federally funded rape crisis centers that are intended to be single sex, in fact, are single sex. And it requires the Office of Personnel Management, which oversees all of federal employment, to make sure that employees are recognized as the sex that they are.
OK, Kara, thank you very much for that. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for joining us, Kara Dansky. Well, there's a lot more to come between now and 9 o'clock. We'll see you in a second.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK, further wet and windy weather to come, although signs of an improvement later on in the week. At the moment, low pressure is anchored towards the west of the UK. That's dominating our weather. Tightly packed isobars indicating pretty blustery conditions, and these weather fronts moving in from the south and southwest, bringing outbreaks of rain at times. One band of rain affects Scotland tonight, giving some hill snow, particularly above about 450 metres, where we'll see some settling snow here. And another area of rain moving in from the southwest across England and Wales into the early hours, some of which could be quite heavy, accompanied by blustery winds, particularly towards the southeast. It's mostly a frost-free night, with temperatures in mid-single figures. As for Monday, well, we hold on to a very unsettled picture. Low pressure still close by towards the west of the UK. So to start with on Monday, although there'll be some brightness towards the north of mainland Scotland, the rest of the country is likely to see some showery bursts of rain, again with some hill snow in places. Across Northern Ireland, there'll be showery bursts of rain as well, and showery too across parts of Wales into the southwest of England. So it's the south and east of England, some central parts too, that are likely to see the best of the early brightness. As we go through the rest of the day on Monday, with low pressure still close by, there'll be further outbreaks of rain at times in pretty much all parts of the UK. Occasional bright spells between, still some winteriness across the hills of Scotland at times, and wherever you are, a pretty blustery day with some gales, particularly down towards the south and southwest at times through the day. And despite some sunshine at times, those temperatures will be struggling. Highs of 6 to 9 Celsius, 9 down towards the southwest. It's 48 in Fahrenheit, but add on the effect of that unsettled weather and feeling much cooler out and about. As for Tuesday, well, with low pressure still over the top of the UK, there'll be further showers to come at times. Again, some of those could be quite heavy at times. The winds do start to ease down, so probably feeling a little bit better when we get the sunshine between those showers, with temperatures still peaking at around the 10 Celsius mark. So Tuesday and Wednesday continue pretty unsettled, further rain at times, but things do start to quieten down later in the week with some sunshine around.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far, £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
We won 25,000. I'd say don't hesitate, do it. If you're not in it, you've got no chance of winning it.
Don't miss out, as lines close on Friday. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And fashionistas are keen to see which new trends are set to hit the catwalk.
Well, our next guest is very well placed to share her predictions with us after being a contestant on hit ITV series Dress the Nation, as well as being an upcycling and sewing consultant.
Wow. Joining us now is Tendai Murewe. I want to go back to you appearing on the ITV Dress the Nation.
Right.
Tell us about that experience. What was that like?
Oh, that was one of my highlights as a upcycling consultant. I learned to sew in my kitchen 5 years ago. And then, during COVID, just making masks. Then the next thing I was on a Dress the Nation, making dresses in front of TV. Yeah, it was just incredible. I think we all had all these clothes that we have, but we don't know what to do with them. So mainly I started with men's jackets, taking off the sleeves and putting it like a print on.
I've tried this. I've tried taking off my sleeves before. I now have about 3 jackets with no sleeves. I never managed to put them back on.
You need to come to a workshop. You need to come to a workshop.
I need an upcycling consultant. 2025, what can we expect fashion-wise?
I think bold prints are back. People are loving. I think you walk on the streets in frollals and oversized men's jackets.
So the exact opposite. We have drastically underperformed this morning. You're just saying not like us.
We just woke up this morning and thought it's winter, it's cold, it's grey.
Grey, miserable.
Is that not the way to go?
No, it is. It's still, I think because fashion is expressive. It's whatever you want to express yourself. You know?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Allen and this is Free Speech Nation. And in this hour, another British classic that's fallen victim to cancel culture, the convicted murderer claiming to have been misgendered, and will AI replace Lewis Schaefer? Plus, how some of the United States reacted to their president.
I'm personally here because I had a mental breakdown after Donald Trump won.
Checks out. Oh, and comedians answering some crazy cultural developments from the live studio audience. But first, the news.
Very good evening to you. The top story at 8 o'clock. Well, it's breaking news from Downing Street. Number 10 officials have confirmed tonight Sir Keir Starmer and Donald Trump have agreed to meet soon and had a call earlier this evening, highlighting the strong and enduring ties between the UK and the United States. In that conversation, Trump expressed his condolences to the Prime Minister after the loss of his brother, praising his leadership and his efforts so far. The pair discussed also key issues including the Middle East and Starmer thanking Donald Trump for his role in the Gaza ceasefire deal. The US President also welcomed the release of British hostage Emily Damari and spoke warmly of his respect for the royal family. In other news tonight, the Home Secretary has warned online platforms they must act now to remove violent content after the Southport killer accessed extremist material before his deadly attack. Axel Rudakabana, who murdered 3 young girls and tried to kill 10 others, downloaded an Al-Qaeda training manual and watched graphic footage online just before his stabbing spree in July last year. Yvette Cooper says it's unacceptable that such hateful content remains easily available and is urging tech companies to take immediate action ahead of new online safety laws in March. The government has also announced a public inquiry into missed chances to stop Rudakabana, who was already known to police and anti-extremism authorities. And the government is also cracking down on online knife sales after it was revealed that the 18-year-old had purchased his murder weapon on Amazon when he was just 17 years old. Under tough new rules, buyers will need to show photo ID at the point of purchase and again when the knife is delivered, with packages being banned from being left on doorsteps. Delivery drivers will only be allowed to hand knives to the person who ordered them, in plans set to feature in the Crime and Policing Bill this spring. The Home Secretary says it is a total disgrace that dangerous weapons are still so easy for children to get hold of. A 53-year-old man has been charged with the murder of a nurse who was found fatally injured in a street in Plymouth. Paul Butler is accused of killing 48-year-old Claire Chick, who was discovered last Wednesday and later died in hospital. Her family says she was a beautiful and a lively soul. Mr. Butler is due to appear before Plymouth Magistrates Court tomorrow. And 100-mile-an-hour winds have left 2 people dead and thousands without power. But now a new storm named Herinia is adding to the chaos. With gusts of up to 80 miles an hour recorded in Devon so far and heavy rain sweeping across the country, the Met Office has issued warnings for floods, travel disruption and even a danger to life. Coastal areas are set to face crashing waves too, and dozens of flood warnings are in place as saturated ground increases the risk of more damage. That's the news on GB News. Another update at 9 o'clock. Now, though, it's back over to Free Speech Nation.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Stephen Allen, with my panel, Cressida Wetton and Lewis Schaefer. And let's get some more questions for them, though, from the audience. Our first question in this section comes from Luke.
Hi, guys. What do you think is the cause for the rise in eating disorders in children?
The rise, well, what has been the blame for the rise of children's eating disorders? Emergency hospital admissions for children with eating disorders have risen sixfold in a decade amid the contagious influence of social media, they put it down to. Just 3,000 under-18s were admitted to an acute medical ward in 2021-22. An increase of 515% in 9 years, the study has found. Wow. Lewis, what's your thoughts on this?
My thought, there's more food out there. Maybe if they cut back on the food, there would be fewer eating disorders.
I think it might be the other way. I think...
What do I think? I got to tell you what I think. That was kind of a joke. But not really. Not really. The fact is that people are getting sicker and sicker because we're losing control of our lives. And when you're losing control of your lives, the parents think their kids are more messed up. The kids think they're more messed up. Everybody's been, like, medicalized. The NHS needs more people to demand services from the NHS because they're being paid money by the British taxpayers. So it's all a scam.
Is that what's going on here, Christa?
No, I think mainly it's girls as young as 11 comparing themselves to Lewis Schaefer. Yeah. I think that's the real danger.
You know what? If they ate like me, they'd look pretty damn good.
They'd also look like a 67-year-old man.
Well, you know what? At least they'd be healthy 67-year-old. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, I do blame social media, of course. Like, I mean, it's rough, isn't it? Here's a picture of somebody who may or may not exist, who's perfect. What do you look like? Probably not the same.
Well, you know what? That's...
No, I was going to say, we've known about this, we've talked about that topic for so long now. At some point, would there not be this sense of, like, we now know, don't judge yourself in comparison to people on Instagram, because they've got the filters and they only pick the good ones. When are we going to learn that?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Well, why not, though? I mean, I've stopped judging myself.
It just doesn't, does it? It reminds me of Jordan Peterson always banging on about there's no difference between being self-involved and being depressed. And it's just this constant diet of what do you look like, what do you look like? I mean, it's just the world we live in.
Yeah. But social media, well, particularly Instagram is the one that's always linked to girls feeling bad about things. But
that's because they take stills, don't they, where they've sucked it all one way or another and done the lips and everything. And it's, as you say, it's not realistic, but we are bombarded with it.
Yeah.
That's because Cressida is young. And whereas I remember a time when people had anorexia and bulimia and they blamed the magazines. They blame magazines. They go, we got to stop magazines from putting pictures of pretty girls.
Well, so that's the same. We've got more bulimia and anorexia now, and we've got more images. So I'm in agreement with you.
There was a problem back then. It was a new problem. People don't talk about anorexia the way they used to, and it was really big back in the day. This is just a sign, like you said, Cressida, people are depressed, say. And why are they depressed? Let's work on making the country happier. Let's make the country a great country again.
When are you going to start doing that?
I'm trying to find somebody to lead the thing. I shouldn't be doing anything. I'm a comedian.
That's what I keep saying.
Yeah.
Our next question comes from Jane. All right, Jane.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Why has a classic British pop song been banned by a choir this week?
Yes, this is a good one. Why has a classic British song been banned by a choir this week? It's Britain's largest choir group has removed the Police song Every Breath You Take from its repertoire over claims that the lyrics portray an abusive relationship. Sting has admitted that the words Every Breath You Take, Every Move You Make, but you know the lyrics, that it could be seen as sinister, and it's got some sinister overtones to it. It's a stalking song, isn't it? It's a manual for stalking.
We don't know what his thinking was. He said something at one time. He's Sting. It is. What? We got to only have nice songs. You sometimes get angry and you need a song which says, you know what, I'm going to mess your life up. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah, you need nastiness. You need nastiness when you.
Well, you need nastiness in art as opposed to in life. Let's work it out on the page, guys. I think that's a great place for it.
And it was one woman, the woman who ran this rock thing. There was no committee that she put it. She said she made a decision. She asked a few members of it was just her. And they, it's a great song. It's one of the best songs ever written. It's like the number one. It's like Yesterday. It's a great song. In a couple of years, those people who do things like that will be gone.
Boom.
Oh. Okay, make a note. Five people applauded. The rest will say. I heard Lewis Schaefer say they'll be gone.
You should say that to her in the form of a song, and that'd really get to her.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? She wouldn't sing it.
Yeah. That's true. It could have been worse. If you look at the police back catalogue, that Don't Stand So Close to Me that's dodgy, isn't it?
Absolutely. What are we going to do? Whack-a-mole all the songs out of existence? I remember seeing this interview with Mick Jagger once, and somebody commented on him singing about women, and he said, well, what are you going to sing about? Holes in your trousers? And it's like, yeah, exactly. This is what art is for. Why bother with it?
And I don't imagine he's got too many holes in his trousers these
Well,
days.
this was the 60s.
All right,
so...
but that difficult second album when you can afford trousers is quite a tricky one, isn't it? All right, let's move on to the next one. Our next question comes from Anthony. What have you got for us?
What are HMRC's staff being given one day off a week to promote?
Yes, this will be good, especially if we look at the data. Just as you're about to panic and fill in your self-assessment form, like I will when I get home, what are HMRC staff being given one day off a week to promote? Well, it's civil servants at the tax office have the equivalent of one day a week to promote gender ideology. Seems like a good use of time, Cressida?
I can't believe this is still happening. I mean, it's not as bad as it sounds. It's not all the staff. It's not everyone that works for us can have a day off. But it is some of the staff, and they are still recruiting people to promote gender ideology.
It is.
But they should just be doing our taxes.
Yeah. It is one of the steps. This is the Telegraph, which is like, I don't know, I always thought the Telegraph was almost as good as the Times. And
you should hear what he says about the Times.
But the point is like it isn't even the HMRC. It's just the people in charge, Cressida, of lesbian, gay, whatever that you know, bi, plus, whatever those people are, that guy is given one day off a week to do that. So,
yeah, but that guy's still being recruited.
Yes, and which is wrong. But in 4 years, we will hear that there will be an end to that. They have to be an end. The fact is they're basically admitting that in order for us to hire this LGBT plus person, we've got to promise them one day off a week because they're lazy.
That's not at all what the story is. What they said. That's not. Have you even Googled what LGBT or what the letter stand for? You're going to be surprised when you get further down.
No, it means
the T's going to absolutely stun you.
Yes. The point is they want someone who's going to promote this. Donald Trump just came in and says, no more promotion of this stuff. You want to promote it, you do it on your own time. How wrong? I'm so in love with Cressida.
Well, no, you make... Don't throw the flair to try and get us off topic. It's
that's chaff and redirect.
It's a classic.
Chaff and redirect. That's from...
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's very...
But the problem is, if anyone thinks, do you know what? It's fine if you want to do that in HMRC. It's absolutely... You know, do whatever. I'm just going to call up for the query about my tax. The on-hold times have gone through the roof.
They're going up and up.
Yeah.
So whoever gets, like, one day off a week to do this instead, if they answered some phones, we'd all be happier.
Well, assuming they knew about tax, yes.
Yeah.
Well, they work at HMRC. They should... I hope they know about...
Nothing.
He doesn't know about tax. He knows about LGBT.
That's what the T in LGBT stands for, doesn't it?
Trans. No, it doesn't.
What?
The plus maybe. You don't know.
They don't have negative either. They put it in brackets if it's a negative number. These accountants are...
Is that right? Is that enough? These people, the people of Britain, this is a great... And when I say it's the greatest country in the world because it created America. These are great people. When they realize what an absolute waste it is. You want to be gay? Louis Schaefer wants to be gay, but I should do it on my own time. I shouldn't be gay here. Should I be gay?
One day a week.
Could be if you wanted.
Just one day a week. Yeah.
But they offer me. They could say to me, "You could be gay one day a week." But no, they shouldn't say that. They should say, "It's 5 days. We want you to work."
That is a perfect little performance that leads us beautifully on to the next question, which comes from Cliff. Where's Cliff? Take your time.
Yeah, I'm working up to it. Okay. Yeah. Is it possible that artificial intelligence could ever reach the stage of replacing the incredible, the amazing, the awesome Louis Schaefer?
Will AI replace Louis Schaefer if they remove some of the RAM?
Some of the I thought that was a sexual reference.
This comes... That still works. This comes as...
I'm not quite a ram.
Sir Paul McCartney. Sir Paul McCartney, he's told the BBC that proposed changes to copyright law could legalise rip-off technology, making it impossible for musicians and artists to make a living. And the government is considering allowing AI developers to use creators' content on the internet to help develop their models. That's how it learns, like large language models and stuff. Cressida, are you worried about this? Not this part of it, obviously.
Well, not this. No, and by the way, Adam did a fantastic Lewis Schaefer impression last night on Headliners. I recommend you watch it. No. Am I worried about it? I mean, yes, in the background, yes, obviously it's all scary and it's the future and we've got to be worried. But at the same time, when Paul McCartney starts saying, in my day, you could get into this and make lots of money, I don't know. If you want lots of money, don't go into the arts. That's not something you should be worried about.
He did make lots of money.
Yes, but he's not typical, is it? It's not a career path. You can't say, I'd like to be a Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't think money is the biggest worry here. I think creativity is the concern.
But I suppose, look, they put the hours in, didn't they? They went and did the Hamburg stuff and they put the 10,000 hours. We all know how many hours. They are the classic example of 10,000 hours and came back with a level of creativity
yes.
that, like, AI can just learn and spew some more stuff out.
Well, that's very painful, yes.
You really don't care. I love the hard line, like, yeah, it must be tough for you, you beetle.
It's inevitable, isn't it? I don't know what we do about it now. The genie's out of the bottle. We've had this debate loads of times. When would we go back to? And everyone says 1995, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, just before the internet, that was the best time.
I think the genie being out of the bottle is Christina Aguilera, but other than that, what's your thoughts on it, Lewis? Are you worried?
I don't know how you picked up on Paul McCartney. The guy's talking about Lewis Schaefer here. the people are not interested in Paul McCartney. The fact is, whatever it is, if you know that it's fake, it takes away the fun. It's like crime. It's like crime or sex. You know, you need to know that it's real. You're going to get into trouble. Yeah, it could be mildly entertaining, a kind of a fake Lewis Schaefer, but you can't, because you know that you would think to yourself, oh, this was AI. Lewis Schaefer would never have done that. But if you actually see Lewis Schaefer doing it, you go, oh, shit. Oh, sorry.
AI wouldn't do that.
AI wouldn't do that.
Didn't make me have to apologise for bad language. No, now I have to do it.
And then they would say...
No, ChatGPT doesn't make me do this. I'd like to apologise for the foul language that came out of Lewis Schaefer's face right there. Now we can carry on. I mean, I don't have to apologise that much, but I kind of did. I gave some extra just to apologise for your last one.
And you seem believable. The fact is, people will figure out a way to make money. Like, back in the day, they made money. They were being ripped off on the record sales, so they made money on going on tour.
Yeah.
And then that went down, and now that's the only way they make money is by going on tour. And then they basically increase the money by maybe spot. People will figure out a way to make money. The fact is, should Paul McCartney have the rights to his songs forever? I don't know. That's another question. Should, like, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren forever and ever have the rights to Yesterday, which other people said was ripped off by some, you know...
Well, I mean, there's already when a song's been around for so long, the original copyright runs out.
But they're constantly increasing it. They made it like 75 years, 100 years. You know this.
Yeah, well, he keeps getting older, doesn't he?
Yeah,
that's the thing with Paul McCartney. Now when he sings When I'm 64, people must be thinking, what? It's weird. Just remember.
Right.
It's weird. Yeah.
But he'll be a certain age, and kids will be, and they'll say, why are we denied the money? It's the same way you own a business and you still get money even if you have nothing to do with it.
They're doing all right, those kids, aren't they? Next on Free Speech Nation, more trans madness from north of the border as a murderer takes another inmate to court because they were misgendered. I'm joined by the co-director for Scotland, for Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Don't go anywhere.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So, do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, you know, it's a service that Christys offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate, and then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for evaluation. And Christys sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of our history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Here's another cracker. It's a cracker of a trans story from north of the border, which regular viewers may spot as a reoccurring theme on this programme. So a convicted murderer is claiming that they've been misgendered in prison by another inmate. It's easy to dismiss this story, so we will. No, it's easy to dismiss this story, but it does raise the question, why are trans women in women's prisons? To start with, we could go with that one, couldn't we? Well, I'm joined now by co-director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Thank you very much for joining me. Can you give us a bit of background on this story? The headline looks a bit silly.
Well, it does look a bit silly, but it's quite serious, not least for the poor woman who's been accused of transphobic harassment and abuse of this prisoner. So the prisoner in question is goes by the name of Alex Stewart. He was originally called Alan Baker. And he murdered another man, a father with 2 children, and he was sentenced to life with a minimum tariff of 19 years. He almost immediately, when he went into prison, started claiming that he identified as a woman. And he's been in quite a lot of headlines, actually. If you Google his name, he'll come up. He was in a relationship with another trans-identified prisoner at one point, and that caused a lot of trauma and distress for some of the women in the prison because they were rolling around on the floor together. And then they were separated, and he entered the Miss Prison Fitness competition and won, obviously, because he's a man. And there's been lots of reports over the years coming out from women in prison that he's intimidating presence and they feel scared of him. But now he has claimed that this other prisoner, this woman called Janie Southly, had been making comments about him, calling him a tranny and using he, him pronouns. And I think on one occasion he says that she commented when they were having a karaoke that he should choose to sing Man, I Feel Like a Woman, which is sort of entertaining. You know, that's the kind of thing people might just say to somebody who is like that, but he's decided that this is part of his harassment charge, and it's gone to court, and he is now in a relationship with another murderer, Naomi Fee, who murdered her 2-year-old stepson, which was a very notorious case in Scotland. So she has also been appearing in court as a witness.
See, this might be surprising to some people who, especially when you think this week, we've had lots of newspapers talking about how rough prison can be, the various cruelties and punishments that other prisoners might want to do to you. We won't go into the details here because it's not about this story, but we all know what we're talking about. And then we get a story of someone has made a joke about a karaoke song you might sing, and then that now is this court case. How does that happen?
Do you know, I am not sure exactly, obviously, what's going on, and it's a live case, but there does seem to be a suggestion that now we're becoming more aware of these men in women's prisons and what a problem it is. And obviously in Scotland, we had the notorious case of Isla or Adam Bryson, who was the double rapist who was put in a women's prison for a time. And it has focused some attention on these other murderers who are still in the women's estate. And I do wonder whether this is a way to present as a victim and claim vulnerability. I suppose that might play into it. But, you know, this is someone who emerged in evidence on Monday that he's had no sort of surgery or interventions or anything like that. But he was allowed out of prison to have a tracheal shave, so have his Adam's apple reduced. And that was reported today in the Daily Record. And we're trying to figure out, you know, who paid for this, where he went, the fact that prison guards would have had to have gone with him to the hospital. And so he's getting this unnecessary cosmetic surgery at an expense to the taxpayer for something that is probably the least invasive surgery you could get, but maybe as a way to prove that he's genuinely transgender. And the whole thing just seems almost beyond belief.
OK, now I should probably say that they're not here to defend themselves, but they're in prison, so that makes some sense, I suppose. But do you get any sense of... because this argument, we often talk about this on this show and on other shows on this station, that if you are genuinely someone who believes so passionately about trans rights, you should also hate these stories.
Yeah, I think so, because when you look at the number of transgender prisoners that there are and what they've done, there's a disproportionate representation of really violent offenders who are identifying as trans. So there are two possible explanations for that. One is that trans prisoners or transgender people offend at a higher rate and in the most serious crime bracket than the general population, male and female. Or violent, manipulative men are going to use something like this as a means to get what they perceive as better treatment in prison, and that they are really taking the piss. And that, sorry, I probably shouldn't say that.
I have to apologise like I did about Lewis, but we'll do that at the end. It's all right, carry on. That they are really mocking the system, and that, you know, a lot of them we know come out and they go back to just being identifying as men again. So it's a cynical ploy, and it underlines how dangerous any sort of policy based on self-ID really can be. Any sense that there's a movement to try and look at these loopholes?
No, unfortunately, not in Scotland. There were measures brought in England and Wales. They've been a bit tougher on trying to reform this. In Scotland, we'd had this long-awaited review. They kept promising they were going to examine this, and then when it came out quite recently, it actually changes very little. So they will claim that they have done a review, but what they decided was that they would not put anyone who was accused of a violent crime against women in the female estate, any male person. But the problem with that is that you have no way of knowing with some of these people whether they have committed violent crimes against women, because we know that there's a lot of crimes like rape and domestic violence that often go unpunished. And when you have people who are capable and have committed really brutal murders, or in another case, there's been child sex offenders placed in women's prisons. So we know that these are not people who are non-violent individuals. And this idea that they will be restrained by some innate sense of chivalry from assaulting the women in prison is absolutely ludicrous.
Susan, thank you very much for that. That's Susan Smith, who's the co-director of For Women Scotland. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I should now have to do the presenter thing of saying I'd like to apologise for the coarse language that you heard earlier on during that. It's almost as bad as Lewis Schaefer's. Next on Free Speech Nation, David Bolt will be joining us to discuss all things cultural. Stick around.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK, further wet and windy weather to come, although signs of an improvement later on in the week. At the moment, low pressure is anchored towards the west of the UK. That's dominating our weather. Tightly packed isobars indicating pretty blustery conditions, and these weather fronts moving in from the south and southwest, bringing outbreaks of rain at times. One band of rain affects Scotland tonight, giving some hill snow, particularly above about 450 metres, where we'll see some settling snow here. And another area of rain moving in from the southwest across England and Wales into the early hours, some of which could be quite heavy, accompanied by blustery winds, particularly towards the southeast. It's mostly a frost-free night, with temperatures in mid-single figures. As for Monday, well, we hold on to a very unsettled picture. Low pressure still close by towards the west of the UK. So to start with on Monday, although there'll be some brightness towards the north of mainland Scotland, the rest of the country is likely to see some showery bursts of rain, again with some hill snow in places. Across Northern Ireland, there'll be showery bursts of rain as well, and showery too across parts of Wales into the southwest of England. So it's the south and east of England, some central parts too, that are likely to see the best of the early brightness. As we go through the rest of the day on Monday, with low pressure still close by, there'll be further outbreaks of rain at times in pretty much all parts of the UK. Occasional bright spells between, still some winteriness across the hills of Scotland at times, and wherever you are, a pretty blustery day with some gales, particularly down towards the south and southwest at times through the day. And despite some sunshine at times, those temperatures will be struggling. Highs of 6 to 9 Celsius, 9 down towards the southwest. It's 48 in Fahrenheit, but add on the effect of that unsettled weather and feeling much cooler out and about. As for Tuesday, well, with low pressure still over the top of the UK, there'll be further showers to come at times. Again, some of those could be quite heavy at times. The winds do start to ease down, so probably feeling a little bit better when we get the sunshine between those showers, with temperatures still peaking at around the 10 Celsius mark. So Tuesday and Wednesday continue pretty unsettled, further rain at times, but things do start to quieten down later in the week with some sunshine around.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Joining me now in the studio is Danube Institute fellow David Bolt. David, what stories from the world of culture and arts have caught your cultured and arty eye this week?
Well, let's begin by talking about what I think is a welcome resurgence of local arts funding. For many years now, perhaps as many as 40, 50 years, arts funding has been directed from the centre. There's been a move to base everything around London in terms at least of where the funding is generated from. And I think one of the very, very few things that we can say this Labour Party is doing well in government is that it seems to be reversing that. We've just had news this week, £5 million granted to New Writing North. This was a project founded in 1996 to develop new fictional writing in the northeastern region, so look around Newcastle, parts of Yorkshire and Northumberland, and it's fostered in its earlier years people like the novelists David Salane, Catherine Scanlon. Now, you might think, well, why does a local area need money to develop its fiction writing.
I'll ask the question, sir.
Well,
why does the local area need money to...
Thank you. I'm glad we think so similarly about these things. It makes life much easier, doesn't it?
Yep.
Well, I think there are two things. One is that it's always been an important part of literature in this country that there are different perspectives from a regional point of view. So you might think of the Brontes writing from a Yorkshire point of view. You might think of Laurie Lee writing inside of With Rosie from the point of view of Gloucestershire and the Cotswolds. I think it enables us, in what is for a very small country an extremely diffuse country, with 40-odd counties and as many accents within those counties as there are people to have them, and therefore as many viewpoints and as many ways of speaking. It enables us to understand our fellow countrymen better, as well as enjoying good fiction. And I think one of the problems of the 20th century was that with broadcasting and the rise of sort of a more standardised view of English and of English culture, that was slightly sucked away. Everything became a little more London-based, a little more standard, a little less concerned with the local.
Yeah.
And I think that started to be recognised as not being a great thing. One complete outlier in this was that the longest-running television programme on British television is Coronation Street, which was founded or came out of the regional ITV studios in the 1960s, and indeed The Archers, which has been on the radio since the late 1940s, is all about a farming community somewhere, we assume, in the Cotswolds.
Yeah.
So these long-running things have been there, but in recent years, they haven't really. So I would say it's an extremely good thing that these initiatives, like £5 million is not much money at all in the grand scheme of anything of government funding, and yet this will provide a great fillip to the region.
Yeah, I was going to think, there's certainly been that change. I can see that you lose a lot of local TV, you lose local radio, things become less local newspapers, all of the local things suffer, you become more centralised or at least delocalised, I suppose. But the tastes change as well. So now if you have more fiction written from a local perspective, will it still find the audience like it used to, or are the TikTok generation, they're borderline globalised these days?
Well, I think it does find an audience. It finds an international audience. Look at the popularity of Poldark when that came back in 2015 on television. It got an international audience. And Trainspotting, which was written originally, of course, by Irvine Welsh in a very sort of heavy dialect, became an internationally successful film. Trainspotting 2 did very well. And then you had, in a similar sort of genre, Shuggie Bairn, which won, I think, the Booker Prize. There is obviously an appetite for reading about these things, not just here, and indeed watching them, not just here, but around the world.
Do you think Poldark was really about the postcode and not about the shirtlessness?
Well, it had to have something to do with it.
I suppose, yeah. Good point. But as you say, I mean, 5 million, is this more headline-getting? Look what we're doing a thing, give us a pat on the back, and then 5 million doesn't touch the
Well, I think it's that sort of amount of money that actually it's not sufficient to do that. Had it not been that I'd spotted it in the very bottom of today's paper, we wouldn't be discussing it. It would have, I think, maybe merited a mention on local news, but we on national television, international television, let us hope, would not be talking about it. I think it's perhaps indicative of a realisation among the arts community that giving local arts bodies money and saying, go off and find interesting people, go off and find interesting projects, is a better way of directing funding than having what we've had for far too long, which is the Arts Council saying, we're going to decide what gets the money. And in our incredible ivory tower, we're going to decide what the future of the arts is in Britain for the next 5 or 10 years, which simply doesn't work. It's always the problem with socialism. They think they can direct from the centre, when, as anybody who's read his Hayek knows, the uses of knowledge in society means that diffusion is better for everyone.
You know which room you're in, don't you? Look at that. At the end, you're talking about arts and then you bring in a critique of socialism. Nice, right. Anything else been catching your eye this week?
Oxfam has decided that we owe the Indians £52.5 trillion.
Oh. Better start doing a whip round.
So everybody get down to the charity shop and buy lots and lots of books. This is Oxfam's descent yet further from what was originally a foundation of Quakers and Oxford Dons designed to alleviate poverty in the developing world to a straightforwardly socialist campaigning organisation. They've taken the highly discredited and deeply discredited work of 2 Indian Marxist academics, which has decided that between 1756 and 1900, such was our ravaging of the Indian continent that we now need to give them the equivalent of 20 years of our GDP, and has blown this up to say that this is yet another instance of the rapacious British getting away with things. Right. You might point out, for instance, that by 1914, India had the world's 4th largest cotton industry and the world's 4th largest railway network, and that probably wouldn't have happened were it not for the British Empire. You might also point out from an historical point of view that in the 18th century we stopped the French getting in the 19th century we stopped the Russian Tsarist Empire getting in, and throughout the entire period of British involvement with India, we were generally much more benevolent than any other colonial peoples. We also gave them roads and railways, and we gave them an education system and a civil service, most of which they still use now. What's quite concerning about this, from a geopolitical point of view, is that it plays into the narrative that Narendra Modi's BJP has been building up over the past 14-odd years of their being in government, that absolutely everything to do with the colonial period was bad and needs to be destroyed. India is the only country in the world where the knowledge of and use of English has declined over the past 20 years. This has been a government policy. They've recently replaced in Delhi a statue of King George V, King Emperor George V as he was, with a statue of Subhas Chandra Bose, who was a Nazi sympathising man who tried to, during the Second World War, get up a regiment to kick out the British. Thankfully, it didn't work because 2 million Indians volunteered for us.
We've got less than a minute on this, but I think cause I can almost understand the Modi point of it. But why is Ofcom? Oops. Why is Oxfam? I'm going to get a letter now. Why is Oxfam doing this? Why? What's the motivation?
Because Oxfam has, as I say, become this incredibly left-wing campaigning organisation. If you go to any of their charity shops now, which I really enjoin your viewers not to do other than for sociological research, you will see that in the windows are these great screeds which could come straight from a Green Party or SWP leaflet on one side, and then on the other you'll have a great deal of guff about trans and pride and equity and diversity and inclusion. It's long ago gone from what it was, which was a noble charity set up to help the Third World, and it's become yet another arm of, I'm afraid, taxpayer-funded left-wing grievance-mongering.
I was only going in for a jigsaw. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, typical. Well, thank you very much for joining us. That's Danube Institute fellow David Alderoy-Bolt. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, on the way next. Next on Free Speech Nation, it's time for social sensations, and this is as US residents react to their new president.
I'm personally here because I had a mental breakdown after Donald Trump won.
Oh dear. There's more. See you in 2.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
There's plenty of sunshine on offer for many over the next couple of days in Europe, but there is some heavy rain as well, particularly for parts of Portugal, northern Spain, northwestern parts of France, and some blustery westerly winds as well continuing throughout Monday. Further east, though, there is plenty of sunshine on offer for southern parts of Italy, Greece, Cyprus, seeing plenty of sunshine throughout Monday afternoon. Temperatures here generally in the mid to high teens, with the highest temperatures likely across Tenerife, where we'll see temperatures around 22 or 23.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
We've got the Daily Mail now with the latest in the court case over whether a man is a woman or a man. It's a tough question, and J.K. Rowling has given her opinion. I think I can guess what it is, Cressida.
Explosive twist in Australia's What is a Woman trans battle as Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gets involved. So this is the court case Giggle versus Tickle. Tickle was a...
He's Mr. Men.
That's right. It's a Mr. Men trans battle.
Kind of is a Mr. Man.
It was a women's group, wasn't it? Tickle, Giggles... Oh, I get it wrong. Giggles for Girls. And Roxy Tickle, who is a trans woman, wanted to join this group and wasn't allowed, was banned for being a biological male, and then sued and amazingly got $10,000 for this, which is already extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
But it's now doubling down and is going to file a cross appeal seeking to upgrade the judgment.
Yeah.
So Roxy has come back for another bite of the cherry.
And I've had a look at this Roxanne Tickle, the trans woman.
Is she pretty?
No, not one of the pretty ones. Not a Blair White. Just looks like, to be honest, it looks like
you could be sued for $10,000.
Looks like one of us.
Yeah.
To be honest, no. Like I mean, I'll happily.
For yourself.
No, I think it's an absolute. It's a farce, and it's making a mockery of not just It's not just making a mockery of, women's right to have their own spaces. It's making a mockery of genuine trans people who actually put some effort in and look like a woman.
What do you mean a genuine trans
And also,
people?
if
We don't believe in that.
No, if your name was Roxanne, if you were going to transition, you wouldn't pick the name Roxanne Tickle.
What?
You choose Tess.
Tess. That's a bit kind of name. No, the truth is, that's one of the problems, is you get a choice of the name you're going to choose. And of course you're going to choose like a hot Roxanne. That's a hot Roxanne. That's a great name. They're not going to choose.
You don't think
Louis.
Tess would work better with Tickle?
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Social Sensations, the part of the show where we look at what's been going viral this week on social media. Protesters have been in meltdown this week since the inauguration of President Donald Trump. Still not sure why they have to rally in fancy dress. Let's take a look.
I'm personally here because I had a mental breakdown after Donald Trump won.
It's devastation. It's absolute, complete devastation to people's mental, emotional, physical, and psychological health. People are dying as a result of Trump being elected. There are people dying by suicide because they don't want to live in a country where their rights are not respected and them as people are not seen as people, but rather than objects of that should be eliminated.
Oh, Christys, do you think it might slightly undermine your point when you're dressed as something that should be put over a toilet roll?
Well, that's what I would expect from a bigot like you, Steve. She seemed like a very... Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I've had a mental breakdown watching that. I feel terrible for her, but also I'm laughing at her.
Yeah. And, Lewis, as someone who's inspired mental breakdowns, when you look at those people, what do you think's going on there?
I think they're on a high-carb diet. They're not getting enough red meat. You're laughing, but that really could... And they're probably at uni a little bit too much. It's very stressful times, not getting enough sleep. It's sad, really, because their time in America is gone. They're not. It sounds good right now with their group of friends, but I don't think it's going to last.
They're all young. They're the future, aren't they? People at that age.
Not thinking like that. I thought like that when I was their age too. Everybody thinks that way.
Did you have an angel outfit?
Hell's Angel outfit. Charlie's Angels.
No internet in those days. What a blessing.
Yeah. But there are still pictures out there.
But it also shows, like, the problem with certainly politics in America, and it's probably the same here, that people are so on one side, so tribal, that if an election doesn't go your way, it's not like, oh, what do we need to do to improve and try and get the vote next time? It's never... I've seen videos of people saying, my family members who voted for Trump never speak, you're dead to me. Can I count on your vote in November?
It's so sad. And Biden did his best to step away gracefully and everything.
Yeah, but with his knees.
Well, calming rhetoric. Oh, yeah, what do? You can't climb down from that. I don't know what they do. They need to back away gracefully, and we have to not laugh at them on social sensations to give them room to manoeuvre. I failed.
You know what? Exactly. That's a good point. That's exactly... He said the opposite. He said, how can they get our vote? Well, how can we get their vote if we're going to laugh at them on social sensations?
Oops. Next up is this video of some poor person coming out worse for wear in this week's windy weather. It was sexier when Marilyn Monroe did it. You been caught in anything like that this week, Lewis?
Just the emotions of a woman.
OK, I won't ask for any further detail.
It reminds me of when you get back from the pub at midnight and realise you didn't actually make the bed before you left.
Yeah. You just climbed inside the duvet cover instead.
Well, that's how you feel doing it if you've had half a shandy or something.
And we were talking earlier on about that clip, and someone was being a bit too serious. Like, oh, it must be terrifying if that happens to you. No, it's terrifying if you're in the house and you look out the window and all of a sudden a monster from a horror film is out there coming to get you. Absolutely terrifying. Now, for some questions from the audience. Who's got one?
I've just bought a...
Not a question so far, but carry on.
I've just bought an Amazon thing
and
a Google thing. Do you think it's OK for Google and Amazon to listen in on us?
You bought an Amazon thing and a Google thing.
Yes.
Is it OK? By you saying thing because you don't want to accidentally trigger...
No, it's
Excellent.
Yeah.
OK, Google.
Yes.
I don't know why I think doing it as Tommy Cooper will stop it activating, just like that. Cressida, we're talking smart speakers.
I don't know what you're into. I don't know what you're talking about.
Amazon does.
Are you? Well, exactly. If the question is, do I think they're listening? Absolutely. I do.
But, so the technology is meant to work like this. They listen locally until they hear the trigger phrase, and then when they hear the trigger phrase, they send, like, the little buffer of listening back to the server to be processed. So that...
The trigger phrase?
OK, Google.
Oh,
I don't want to say it, because smart speakers will be...
I see.
Yeah.
OK.
Although I could just say that and then, like, say subscribe to my podcast and everyone would... It's the only way I'll get listeners. But, so, yeah, in theory, the trigger phrase, the one that activates the machine, then sends that data back to the centre.
Oh, I see.
Look at the belief I've got from this audience. Yeah? You're not convinced by that? No, they don't believe it at all. Lewis, you like a conspiracy theory. Tell us what's happening here.
I don't follow these kind of... there's a saying that I came up with, this is brilliant, which is that paranoia is the last hope of the ignored. And that's what... Yeah, if you're not getting enough attention, you're sitting there thinking somebody's listening to you at Amazon headquarters. I'm more worried about actual people that I'm dealing with on a daily basis in this country.
They're not listening to you.
They're not, but they could cause more trouble and headache to me.
You can do that on your own. You don't need that.
No, I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, no, what is the answer? The answer is I wouldn't worry about it because...
You only do half sentences?
I don't know why I wouldn't worry about it. Back in the day, I said, there aren't enough people in the world to listen in on people's conversations, OK? But now, because of AI and because of tape recording, there might be enough people who could actually listen in and listen to that trigger phrase, whatever. But by the regime will go down, is going down in 5 years.
I don't know anything about the Google thing, but there was a case a while ago of some Amazon employees who got in trouble for listening where they shouldn't have been. Like the terms and conditions, which I'm sure we all read when you sign up for the Amazon thing. You take a day off work and you read through all the terms and conditions and you agree with it at the bottom. I'm sure in there it says that they can't listen to your stuff, but some got in trouble. So are you worried that they'll be listening to what you're doing?
And what are you doing?
That's a good question. Into the microphone, go on.
Yeah, into the microphone.
I bought both.
Why did you buy both?
Because I wanted to see what both was like.
You want to be listened to?
No, I wanted...
That's the only reason you'd buy both.
Well, because one was listening, so I bought the other one because I thought the other one wouldn't listen.
Do you ever get them to talk to each other?
Yeah.
And what are they saying? Well, if I ask them what they're saying.
Yeah. Oh, no, I will. He's right there. What do they say?
It's a bit of a muddle.
They're saying this guy's not that interesting.
They've stopped listening. You're going to have to get a Siri thing involved next. That's the only way you'll be paid attention to. Yeah. I'm nervous to say. Anyone else got a question for us? A couple of minutes left on the show. No, you're not allowed to ask one. Anyone else wish to? Anyone else got a smart speaker? Look at this. This would be exactly the right demo. Oh, you do have one. Are you worried about them listening to you?
He's very worried that I have too many devices at home. So.
And what do you worry? Do you want to hand the microphone over so we can hear this? What do you worry about them hearing?
Well, I logged into Amazon. I used to have one, and I logged into Amazon, and you can see everything you said line by line. Like everything. It's
transcript
still,
of your
transcript,
life?
of everything.
That's terrifying.
So,
really?
But it didn't, as you said, it might not go anywhere after that. But
because when we make videos to put on the internet, you have to try and do subtitles, and it's really annoying trying to get transcripts. So maybe if I just play it to my Amazon speaker, I could
I don't
log
like
in.
that. Think of all the divorces that can be prevented. Now she can say, look, you did say it, or I did tell you.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think it's going to be divorces that happen. You actually can prove what happened, yeah. So you're never going to go near the smart... Do you worry that smart technology is there? For example, right, my new smartwatch, definitely listening right now. I could wake it up by saying a phrase to it. So even if you don't buy the things, they're listening.
I don't think people need as much as they've provided thinking that, because I just find it weird that you're like talking. Say you're on your own in your house, you're talking to things, and like if people use it for like alarm clocks and like that. But you can see what the time is on your phone.
Prince Charles used to talk to plants. Surely this is a step in the right direction, isn't it? Listen, thank you very much for all of that, and thank you for joining us on Free Speech Nation. Thank you to my panel, Cressida Wetton and Lewis Schaefer, and to all of my brilliant guests this evening. But if you want to join us live in the studio, you can be part of the wonderful audience. Get down here. You can go to the website www.sroaudiences.com and you could be here. Stay tuned for the brilliant Ben Leo Tonight that's on the way next. And don't forget, Headliners is on at 11 o'clock. Till the next one, have yourself a good one.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. During the week ahead, we hold on to unsettled weather across the UK, further wet and windy weather to come, although signs of an improvement later on in the week. At the moment, low pressure is anchored towards the west of the UK. That's dominating our weather. Tightly packed isobars indicating pretty blustery conditions.